Okay, so welcome to a show about death, I guess. Uh, I don't know what this is. Probably, I guess it's a podcast. But effectively, I'm just planning on talking about death. Now, so many people say that there's only two things unavoidable in this life, and I suppose that's true: life and death. Not what you expected, right? Most people say death and taxes, but that's just a popular saying. Taxes are unfortunately taxes are actively entirely avoidable if you do it right. In fact, a lot of people do avoid paying their taxes, and a solid portion of those people don't even face consequences for that. But in the end, it does mean that taxes are technically avoidable. There is the fact that uh, sorry, there is a thing that one person says, Josh, I believe, from Mythical Kitchen, in his series Last Meals, he says that there's only two things unavoidable in life. We all gonna die and we all gotta eat. Which, in a way, is sort of true. More true than death and taxes. But at the same time, you can't absolutely not eat. Sure, you'll die. But you can. It's a choice you can make and then just face the consequences. But then you'd have to face the consequences. Death and taxes is the two things that are unavoidable. The only two things that are truly unavoidable in this world are life and death. No matter what you do, you cannot choose to avoid dying. And no matter what you do, you cannot choose to avoid being born either. In the end, there are only two things unavoidable in this world: life and death. Or birth and death, if you would. But that's exactly, I suppose that's what I wanted to talk about. Death is a mysterious thing, I suppose. Very, very mysterious. Most people can't tell you exactly what comes after death. And if you asked what is death, depending on the person, you'd get a variety of answers. Like a scientist would probably tell you that death is the shutdown of the brain and organs and, well, the body. But somebody who's religious might give you something different. Might give you a different answer. As to the question of who's right and who's wrong, well, who knows, really? Who knows, truly? Who truly knows? Who truly knows? But in the end, death is, well, unavoidable. It will come. No matter who you are, no matter what you do, no matter how much you try to avoid it, it will come one day. Who knows when, who knows how, and who knows why, but one day, death will come for you. And no matter what happens, and eventually, life will be born. And no matter what happens, I suppose, eventually, one day, life will be born. Even if the human race goes entirely extinct, there will be other races. Even if the sun explodes and the entire universe, the entire world is eradicated, the fragments of our planet will eventually land on far away planets and begin to develop life of their own. Whether or not that would be human life or something else is, well, unknown. I started thinking about death a lot more recently, you know? And it started from an odd place. It started from one of my teeth. It's broken, right? I have a broken tooth. Happened when I got punched in the face quite hard, and it broke one of my teeth. I was fairly young at the time, so it's sort of understandable. But that tooth is permanently broken. And I don't know, I saw that tooth and I thought, what will people think when they see my skull? That tooth broken. Will they wonder how it broke? Will they ask? I mean, most likely by that point, nobody will know. But will they inquire? Will they even think about it? I suppose death is inevitable and will come to us all in the end, no matter what we do. It's still something we try to avoid. I suppose that's where the whole immortality thing comes in. Like, people who have only lived for a short time, their fear of death is greater than their fear of living for a long time. Living for a long time more, yeah. But for people who've already lived too long, people who have, like, old people, a lot of old people feel that they've already lived far too long and believe that at this point, living for thousands or millions or eternity more would be more curse. They fear living longer more than they fear death. And I suppose that's entirely fair. But it's an interesting little detail. I mean, if you ask certain people whether or not they fear death, you'd probably get differing answers depending on who you ask. And most interestingly, some of them would be lying. Like, I used to say that I don't fear death. But the more I think about death, the more I've been thinking about death recently, the more I realize that I do fear death. I would love to be immortal. And I suppose you could get a better view of whether or not they fear death by simply asking them if they wish to be immortal. I forgot where I was at. Right, like, you could probably get a better idea of whether or not somebody truly fears death by simply asking them whether or not they would like to be immortal. If they say that they'd like to be immortal, then they actually do, to some degree, fear death. Now, that doesn't inherently mean that if somebody says that they wouldn't like to be immortal, that they don't fear death. But it does mean that they fear death less than than somebody who would rather be immortal. You know? Death is a very interesting thing. Now, I'm mostly going to talk about death itself, but what comes after death is also probably going to be a topic I'd like to consider, because what does come after death? Like, truly, who knows? There's so many conflicting ideas, so many conflicting stories, so many different thoughts. and theories and ideas and beliefs of what comes after death that no one can ever truly know because, well, what comes after death is truly unknown. Now, death itself is, however, more what I want to talk about. Like, the process of death is very interesting. The brain, the body slowly shuts down, and the brain, of course, tries to stop it to the best of its ability. Like, I saw a video recently that talks about exactly why people seem to see their life flash before their eyes before they die. And it was a very interesting video. In the video, it spoke about how effectively what happens is when the body is dying, the body is shutting down, the brain goes through everything that it remembers, every memory that it has, that it holds. It goes through each and every memory that it holds to try and find something, anything that can save you and prevent you from dying. And, well, most often it doesn't manage to do so. It doesn't manage to find anything, and so you still die in the end. But the idea is very interesting. That's like a scientific explanation, right? But if you ask somebody who's more religious, somebody who doesn't believe so much in science, why the light flashes before your eyes right before you die, you might receive a different explanation if they give you an explanation at all. Like, even if you ask some scientists why your life flashes before your eyes before you die, a lot of them might not be able to tell you. And hell, even that explanation of it running through memories to try and find a way to save you might even be inherently wrong. And that's very interesting, in my opinion. The idea that nobody really knows what happens when you die. Not just what happens after you die, but what happens when you die. Like, inherently, in and of itself, what is death?